the subject of the protagonist's secret affection, revealed his intentions to marry. Naturally, Kim Jitae was horrified by his friend's announcement. Despite his unrequited feelings, he had subconsciously hoped for reciprocity. Nevertheless, Han Kyunghoon announced that the wedding was to take place very soon, as his beloved, with whom he has been for 5 years, is pregnant. This news further shocked the brunette, but he was unable to object. Noticing his friend's dejected mood, he inquired about it. Although Jitae tried to explain it as mere surprise, it barely resembled the truth. Therefore, his friend attempted to console him, though he did not understand the reasons for his sadness, and assured him that he would always remain his dearest friend. With a smile, the blue-eyed man agreed with the statement, and then congratulated the object of his secret love on the upcoming wedding. Although the brunette acted out of politeness, his friend asked him to be the best man. That evening, Jitae was drinking at a local bar catering to the LGBTQ+ community. He felt morally oppressed by the earlier conversation, as all his hopes of someday being with his beloved were finally shattered by Kyunghoon's impending marriage. Moreover, he was angry with his beloved for having to serve as the best man at the event. Soon, the bartender noticed Jitae's downcast state and thus asked him to drink less to avoid accidentally ending up in the hospital. The protagonist confessed that he would prefer such an outcome to avoid participating in his friend's wedding ceremony. Thanks to the dialogue, the bartender surmised what had happened in the brunette's life. The blue-eyed man did not deny the truth. Rather, he shared his story with him. Meanwhile, other patrons of the bar became interested in Jitae's persona. One of them even spoke of rumors that the young man visits the establishment several times a year to drink heavily and then leaves with the most beautiful patron to a hotel together. This information intrigued one of the guys, prompting him to decide to get to know him. When he approached Jitae, their friends began wagering that he would be rejected. Unexpectedly, an outsider interjected into the conversation, placing a substantial bet that he himself would capture the brunette's attention that evening. Meanwhile, a blonde man from the group approached the protagonist, displaying kindness and, through flirtatious means, suggested they go to a hotel. Although Jitae understood that the man who approached him did not suit his tastes, he was prepared to agree to go as he wanted to spend the night with someone. Suddenly, a mysterious man interrupted the proceedings. Approaching the two young men, he advised that the brunette should not settle for the first comer, as it could be dangerous for his health. The blonde man was angered by this, yet he understood that he simply could not compete with such a handsome, dark-haired man. Thus, he hurried to leave as soon as possible. Left alone with the main character, Haejoon sought to understand the reasons behind his indiscriminate choice of partner for the night. Then, the blue-eyed man confessed that it made no difference to him whom he spent his time with. Although the man was taken aback by this revelation, he immediately offered himself as a companion. Even though the dark-haired man appeared more attractive than the previous blonde, Jitae hastily declined. He explained that he found the man's personality peculiar. While the man, shocked by the rejection, was baffled by the situation, the young man noticed that the bride of the object of his secret love was asking him for advice on choosing one of the wedding outfits. The behavior of the pregnant woman infuriated him so much that he changed his mind. In the next moment, the brunette agreed to spend the night with Haejoon, and thus the two young men headed to the hotel. The sudden change in behavior of the blue-eyed man intrigued the other man. Once in the hotel, the two young men immediately commenced the desired process. Although the main character initiated the encounter, he behaved far less freely than the man had expected. Instead, the brunette talked extensively, seemingly experiencing discomfort. Despite initiating the proceedings, the main character acted far more reservedly than expected, talking at length as if to ease his awkwardness. Nevertheless, the dark-haired man had no intention of retreating, and thus initiated close contact, to which the blue-eyed man was not at all opposed. Only towards the end, when Jitae tried to take the initiative, did his partner for the night realize that the young man had only rarely experienced similar evenings with anyone. This revelation surprised Haejoon, yet he was pleased with the turn of events and decided to help the protagonist forget all his troubles for a while. Surprisingly, he succeeded, which left the brunette bewildered by the outcome once the interaction had concluded. As a more personal conversation began between the two young men, the dark-haired man eagerly sought to understand the reasons behind Jitae's despondent state. He speculated various possibilities until the blue-eyed man candidly confessed that the object of his secret love was marrying his beloved girlfriend next month. Haejoon responded to the situation with empathy and then revealed that he too would be attending a close relative's wedding ceremony around the same time. In the next moment, he smiled and suggested that fate might bring them together again at the same event. The dark-haired man referred to his thoughts as destiny. The young man hardly believed what he heard, convinced that such coincidences simply do not occur. For this reason, he hurried to end the conversation and head to the shower. The definitive nature of the refusal, even the mere possibility of meeting again, upset the man, who, once left alone in the room, pulled Jitae's business card from his wallet. Smiling, the dark-haired man remarked that he could now shape fate himself if he wished, hence the protagonist should not be so dismissive of it. When the protagonist emerged from the shower, his partner for the night was already gone. He had left, leaving behind his phone number and a request to call for future meetings. The brunette was against further interaction and thus immediately discarded the note in the trash, feeling even more irritated with Haejoon for his unbearable demeanor. The next morning, Jitae arrived at work. His colleagues, including the boss, immediately noticed that his mood had improved. The blue-eyed man felt awkward upon discovering the attention others paid to him, and thus he hurried to apologize for any inconvenience and disturbance his previous state might have caused. The manager explained that there was no need to apologize, as his primary concern was the brunette's well-being, a sentiment echoed by the other employees. Nevertheless, the young man still felt uncomfortable about the care shown by strangers and tried to at least verbally express his gratitude to them. As he began his work, Jitae mentally acknowledged that the close contact earlier had relieved him of accumulated stress, as it was the only plausible reason for the changes he experienced. Soon, the wedding ceremony of the protagonist's best friend took place. Naturally, he looked stunning, especially to the blue-eyed man. A conversation ensued between the two friends about the groom's splendid appearance. Kyunghoon admitted that he had spent a lot of time getting ready and even resorted to using makeup. Despite this, he assured that all the efforts were more than justified, and thus men should pay more attention to their grooming. Although the protagonist smiled, it was clear he was exerting much effort not to appear sad on this day. Jitae even managed to congratulate his beloved on the wedding. Soon, the conversation was interrupted by other relatives of the groom, prompting him to engage with them. The blue-eyed man, deciding to take a break, stepped outside to smoke. Unexpectedly, the young man bumped into Haejoon. It was evident that the dark-haired man was right, and they indeed had been invited to the same event. The protagonist was shocked by the unplanned meeting with his one-night partner, who, on the contrary, seemed pleased by the occurrence. Only now did the two young men decide to get to know each other personally. To be precise, the man introduced himself by name, startling the other even more than before. It soon became clear how he knew about the brunette's identity. The situation was clarified when the groom, who warmly started chatting with the bride's brother, revealed that he was Haejoon. Naturally, such news greatly astonished Jitae. The object of his secret love was also surprised by the unfolding events, having had no idea about the acquaintance between the two invited guests. Although the dark-haired man attempted to mention that he had previously met the protagonist, the latter denied everything, causing only confusion in his friend. Nevertheless, when the groom formally introduced the two young men to each other and clarified their personal connections to him, the brunette horrifically recalled the words about fate spoken that evening. Naturally, Jitae felt uncomfortable in the company of his beloved and his one-night partner, barely managing to maintain conversation. Despite this, he was compelled to behave with restraint and even shake hands with the man he hoped never to meet again. Mentally, at that moment, the blue-eyed man only wished to flee the event. Just before the ceremony began, with both young men standing close to each other, Haejoon deliberately brought up their past encounter. To be more precise, the man once again discussed fate, even though from an outsider's perspective, this meeting hardly seemed coincidental. Soon, the blue-eyed man decided to inquire how the dark-haired man knew his name. Only then did he admit that he had previously taken Jitae's business card. Naturally, such information did not please the young man, yet his displeasure went unheard. Instead, his one-night partner suddenly asked why he had not been called earlier. The protagonist honestly confessed that he does not meet the same person twice to avoid compounding the problems in his life. It seemed that the man anticipated such a response, for in the next moment, he proposed that the brunette become his steady partner, not just a temporary one, and even suggested going on a date together. Jitae immediately declined the dark-haired man's offer to become a committed couple. He justified his response by stating that he had no plans to see the man again. Moreover, the young man explained that Haejoon's kinship with the bride of his best friend also played a significant role in his decision. The blue-eyed man did not hide the fact that he felt uncomfortable in the company of the man, especially after their previous encounter. During further conversation, it was revealed that the one-night partner had guessed who the object of the brunette's secret love was. Although this shocked the conversationalist, he did not deny it. Nevertheless, he had no intention of discussing it further, for he feared that someone unrelated, or worse, the groom himself might overhear. For this reason, Jitae forcibly silenced the dark-haired man when he inquired about the duration of his infatuation, an act that implied it had been quite prolonged. Without much thought, the man suggested that the blue-eyed should confess his feelings to his beloved, despite them being at his wedding. Of course, the protagonist could not act in such a way, as it would completely ruin the celebration for Kyunghoon and his bride. Then Haejoon, puzzled by the situation, suddenly inquired why the brunette had even attended the event, considering his romantic feelings. The young man honestly replied that he was prepared to endure anything for the sake of his beloved's happiness on this special day. Haejoon disapproved of such self-sacrifice, and thus he suggested that Jitae leave the wedding ceremony as soon as possible. In return, he even promised to help him distract from his personal turmoil once again. Despite having long dreamed of such an opportunity, the blue-eyed hesitated the moment it presented itself, clearly uncertain about the correctness of his decisions. Upon noticing this, the dark-haired man decided to change his approach. Instead of a voluntary offer, he coerced the young man to accompany him by using blackmail. Now, with no other options available, the protagonist agreed. Soon, the two young men found themselves together in a restroom. There, they immediately engaged in a more personal process, evidently to distract the young man from his unrequited love for his best friend. Although Jitae remained calm during their intimate encounter, he later expressed all his anger about the situation. He disliked being coerced. The voiced protest shocked the man, as he found it illogical to express such after the actions had concluded. Nevertheless, intrigued by the brunette's behavior, he became even more interested in him. The next day, while at work, the protagonist reflected on the prior events. He was angry that a stranger had learned his secret. Moreover, he was anxious because the man had the potential to blackmail him with personal information. Soon, the blue-eyed man was forced to distract himself from his own thoughts as a client arrived for work. Upon the client's arrival, it turned out to be his best friend and his wife. The newlyweds were planning a journey together, but wanted to discuss renovations for the apartment they intended to live in. During the conversation, the couple expressed their dismay at the brunette's abrupt departure from the celebration. He, in turn, was forced to fabricate a reason for his disappearance. As the newlyweds had a flight scheduled for their vacation, Jitae tried to discuss all the work details as quickly as possible, but he was interrupted. Kyunghoon confessed that another individual needed to be involved in the discussion about the renovations of their new home. Unexpectedly, the dark-haired man who entered the office was the one. At the meeting, the man behaved casually, which puzzled Jitae. The couple informed them that Haejoon would be handling the design of their renovation. Thus, the two young men would need to collaborate for some time. This news did not please the blue-eyed man, although the dark-haired seemed, on the contrary, quite pleased. Soon, the young man was actively involved in the setup of his beloved's and his spouse's future home, personally participating in the construction. When Haejoon arrived, he took an interest in the details of the brunette's work. Clearly, the dark-haired man had not expected him to engage in physical labor as well. Nonetheless, the blue-eyed man confessed that he held a position in a small housing organization. Thus, he was capable of handling various types of assignments simultaneously. The information surprised the man slightly, but soon, he began discussing the design he had personally conceived. He was pleased that it was being realized. The casual conversation greatly irritated the protagonist because the mere presence of his one-night partner unnerved him. He remembered that at any moment, the man could reveal his secret to others. Despite this, the young man controlled his emotions to avoid exacerbating his situation. However, when Haejoon began discussing more personal matters again, he couldn't hold back and became curt. Throughout the remainder of the renovations, the brunette endeavored to engage with the man strictly on professional matters and to disregard his ambiguous remarks and jests. Soon, while Jitae was discussing the alignment of a wall with another builder, the latter inquired about the identity of the man whom the young man was trying to ignore. Although the protagonist candidly explained Haejoon's role, he still had to endure his colleague's comments about the latter's attractive appearance. He responded indifferently to the information, naively assuming that nothing could further sour his mood. As it turned out, he was mistaken, as Kyunghoon's wife soon sent a photograph from their vacation together. The sight visibly disheartened the blue-eyed man, prompting him to leave the construction site to smoke and take a break. At that moment, the man joined him, quickly surmising the reasons for his downtrodden state. Although he was right, Jitae asked him not to interfere. Soon, a personal conversation ensued between the two young men about the ongoing situation. The dark-haired man wanted to understand why the protagonist could not relinquish his love for his friend. As they discussed this, he asked numerous questions and speculated on possible resolutions. Eventually, Haejoon suggested that the only true way to forget his beloved was to find another partner. It seemed the blue-eyed man understood this as well. Unexpectedly, the man once again proposed a relationship with the protagonist personally. Like before, he declined, but this time he explained the reasons for his response. The brunette deemed the idea of starting a romantic relationship futile, as he had tried something similar before, but only ended up creating more problems for himself. Upon learning this, the dark-haired man accused him of being dishonorable towards another person, noting that Jitae had been in a relationship for over 2 years, but had still not managed to fall out of love with his friend. Despite the blue-eyed man's arguments, the other man still believed it necessary to try the approach again, this time with himself personally involved. The young man found his one-night partner's confidence excessively coarse and intrusive, and thus questioned why he was behaving so persistently. Haejoon paused momentarily, as if unsure what to reply. Soon after, he confessed that he had fallen for him at first sight. The brunette was skeptical of this claim, knowing that a truly loving person would not act so brazenly towards the object of their affection. Nevertheless, the man offered no other justification for his actions, seemingly intent on evading the true answer. Concurrently, he also presented arguments why the young man should agree to a relationship with him. Despite what seemed like a reasonable proposition, the protagonist still doubted his own capabilities and the necessity of such an arrangement. Observing this hesitation, Haejoon proposed a bet in which he would have to make the blue-eyed man fall in love with him and help him forget his best friend. Should he lose, the winner would be granted any wish of their choice. While Jitae still could not understand why the man would act this way, he became genuinely intrigued by the prospect of trying again. After some reflection, the brunette realized he had nothing more to lose in life and boldly agreed to the wager. The young man's response delighted his interlocutor, prompting him to shake hands as a sign of the romantic challenge they were embarking upon. Soon, a gathering of friends convened to discuss the details of the agreement they had made. Among those present was Haejoon, the main architect of the plan. He proudly displayed the protagonist's phone number to the others as proof of his initial success. It emerged from the conversation that the group had wagered on whether the man could make Jitae fall in love with him. He was intent on doing so, therefore, he made every effort to grow closer to him. While one of the friends considered it cruel to wager on the blue-eyed man's feelings, the others thought differently. Even the dark-haired man insisted that their agreement was fair and square. Discussing the details of the wager, the man unabashedly referenced his past experiences of deceiving individuals of non-traditional orientations. Nearby, a young man inadvertently overheard the conversation and recognized the name of his former lover. After some reflection, he realized something untoward was happening. Later, when the protagonist was at work, he appeared extremely fatigued due to the considerable personal demands placed on him by his new partner. Because of this, the brunette momentarily questioned whether agreeing to the deal with Haejoon had been wise. Reflecting on the matter, he could not understand why the attractive dark-haired man had proposed the wager when he could easily attract anyone else. It seemed strange to Jitae that his partner agreed to be with him despite his ongoing affection for another, yet he was confident he would win the bet without issue. Having previously attempted long-term relationships, he now suspected that new entanglements would not alter his situation. Unexpectedly, his former partner Choi Yi-jung reached out, which took him by surprise. Choi requested a personal meeting, presumably because of something he had overheard in the bar from the dark-haired man's group. Nevertheless, the blue-eyed man was unaware of the critical information that was to be disclosed and merely became annoyed by the message. Consequently, in the next moment, he responded with quite harsh messages, asking not to be contacted again, and subsequently blocked the person from his past. Since the brunette did not want any more complications in his life, he considered this a prudent decision. As the workday drew to a close, his boss invited Jitae for a drink. Unfortunately, he had to decline due to other commitments. Then the manager admitted that he had made the offer solely to support the weary blue-eyed man. The protagonist thanked him for his thoughtfulness. Nevertheless, the young man soon arrived for the meeting with his partner, who feigned delight at seeing him. Then the two young men engaged in a relaxed conversation during which the man revealed that he had personally designed the interior of the venue where they were, and furthermore, he worked there as a manager. This revelation surprised Jitae, but he was even more astounded by the dark-haired man's subsequent declaration that he was also the owner. During their discussion, Haejoon inquired about the protagonist's feelings for him, but did not receive a comforting response, as the young man still harbored no affection for him. Frustrated, the man attempted to kiss the young man in front of the patrons, inciting the brunette's indignation as he refused to engage with his partner publicly. After some thought, the man decided to take him to a more secluded space to fulfill his intent. Once alone, he asked the blue-eyed man to take the initiative. Despite agreeing, the young man was quite embarrassed. Hence, he requested that the dark-haired man close his eyes. As soon as Haejoon complied, the protagonist lightly kissed his cheek. Naturally, such a reserved kiss disappointed him, prompting him to take the initiative. It turned out after the romantic gesture that the man desired much more than a mere kiss, which he expressed in the ensuing moment. As Jitae felt uncomfortable due to the unfamiliar setting and the nearby patrons, he hesitated for a long time before consenting to more intimate contact. Eventually, the brunette suggested another equally candid act that they could perform together. Haejoon was taken aback by the protagonist's modest proposal, but nevertheless, he agreed to it, and the two young men proceeded with the act. Although initially reluctant to engage in anything further, the blue-eyed man soon admitted to himself that he desired the same as his partner. Observing the man's expression, the young man realized that he could not always understand his own needs from the start, as his opinion quickly shifted to a positive one. Indeed, the dark-haired man noticed this and soon suggested they engage in a more personal interaction. This time, the brunette agreed. Only after the encounter did the protagonist inquire about Haejoon's views on their ongoing interactions. Jitae still believed their wager was senseless. The man was taken aback by this, as he had thought differently. Consequently, he immediately confessed his feelings and explained his intention to make the blue-eyed man fall in love with him. His words and actions at that moment greatly perplexed the young man, yet it seemed he enjoyed behaving this way. Sometime later, the newlyweds returned from their travels, radiating immense happiness. When the protagonist met them, he endeavored to be gracious and pretended to be pleased with their joy. The brunette first led his best friend and his wife to evaluate the work done in their home, where Haejoon was already waiting to greet them. His presence was unexpected for everyone, including the young man himself. But nevertheless, they decided to review the room design together. The couple was astonished that the construction and furniture installation had been completed so quickly. Naturally, they were immensely satisfied with the outcome. Jitae watched their happiness with evident unease on his face, still contemplating his unrequited love for his best friend. Noticing this, the man quickly endeavored to cheer up the brunette, urging him not to worry unnecessarily and to consider him instead of Kyunghoon. The newlyweds also noticed the close interaction between the two young men. Despite the unusualness of the situation, they were pleased by what they saw. Seizing the moment, the dark-haired man suddenly expressed his desire to grow even closer to the protagonist. Only then did the young man realize precisely what his new partner meant, which made him feel awkward. During their further conversation, the blue-eyed man's best friend even joked that Haejoon might one day take his place in the brunette's life. Although the man truly desired it, the blue-eyed still did not believe in such possibilities, and thus jestingly told Kyunghoon that it was impossible. After a brief conversation, Jitae decided to return to work and hastily tried to leave the group. His friend stopped him to give him a present brought back from their vacation. It was clear that the young man felt uncomfortable with the situation and was initially reluctant to accept the gift, but he was eventually persuaded. As he left the apartment, the man expressed his desire to accompany him. Concerned that this might appear suspicious to others, the blue-eyed requested him not to do so, but the dark-haired man, indifferent to others finding out about their relationship, disagreed. Soon, Haejoon unexpectedly inquired about the protagonist's feelings for his best friend, noting that he hadn't expected them to be so intense. After observing the young man for a while, his partner noted how deep his love for Kyunghoon was. Moreover, he admitted that Jitae was completely unable to hide his emotions. Jitae was uncomfortable hearing this, as it immediately brought back memories of a past relationship with someone he truly didn't love. Therefore, even after hearing the question, the brunette didn't know what to say and thus remained silent, which now made the man feel awkward about the situation. It seemed he wasn't upset about the young man's feelings for Kyunghoon, but he was concerned about the situation. Nevertheless, Noticing the blue-eyed man's despondent state, he felt compelled to stop the conversation. Instead, Haejoon genuinely wanted to walk the protagonist to his car. As the two young men walked, he tried to explain his own feelings about the matter. He confessed that he felt no irritation or anger, but was simply concerned for Jitae's well-being, seeing how much he was suffering. Naturally, the young man was struck by this, as his past experiences had been different, and his partner had behaved otherwise. Despite this, he managed to believe the man's words and was even surprised by his immense kindness. During further conversation between the partners, the dark-haired man asked the protagonist to fall in love with him as soon as possible, to cease the moral pain caused by his best friend. Although Haejoon had his own personal goals involving a wager previously made with his friends, he naturally did not disclose this. Jitae was deeply unsettled by the man's seemingly sincere concern and hurried off to work, leaving the request unanswered. Unexpectedly, as the young man was opening his car door, he paused to thank his partner for the support, surprisingly touching him. After the brunette drove away, the man acknowledged to himself that he found the blue-eyed endearing. Throughout his drive to the office, the protagonist pondered the realization that no one had ever sincerely cared for him before, making the dark-haired man's actions a pleasant surprise. Concurrently, the brunette also recalled how his former partner was irritated by his intense affection for his best friend. He was pleased to realize that things were now different. Moreover, unexpectedly, the young man understood that starting a relationship with Haejoon was not a bad decision, as it seemed to be precisely what he had needed for a long time. Despite this, Jitae still wondered why the dark-haired had decided to make the deal and even start dating him. A little later, when the brunette finally arrived at the office, he decided to smoke a cigarette before entering the building. Unexpectedly, at that moment, he noticed a man standing nearby who turned out to be his former partner. Haejoon shocked the protagonist with his appearance, but had compelling reasons for it. Before explaining them, he tried to scold the brunette for smoking, as he had previously been supposed to quit the harmful habit. Only afterward did he berate the blue-eyed for blocking him earlier, as he truly wanted to convey something important. Nonetheless, it seemed that Jitae did not wish to listen to his former partner. Instead, he merely sought to understand the reasons for his appearance. Then, Haejoon confessed that he had been compelled to come to the brunette's workplace to speak with him in person. Despite the seriousness of the statement, the young man was utterly unwilling to listen. Clearly angered, the interlocutor ambiguously mentioned his intention to discuss the nefarious individual with whom the protagonist was associating. This revelation startled the blue-eyed man, but their conversation was abruptly interrupted by the unexpected arrival of his boss. The boss intervened because the two young men were speaking loudly near the workplace. Initially, he inquired about the identity of Jitae's companion. Naturally, the brunette felt embarrassed in front of his colleague, especially since he could not divulge the whole truth. Without much thought, the young man lied, claiming the ex-partner was merely an acquaintance, and then he hurriedly tried to leave with his boss to end the conversation with Haejoon. However, Haejoon disliked this and immediately tried to stop the blue-eyed man. Upon inadvertently hearing that the protagonist was still in touch with Kyunghoon, his anger intensified. For this reason, he began to shout at the brunette right in front of his boss, not hiding his feelings or the romantic relationship that had existed between them. The ex-partner was clearly infuriated by the fact that Jitae's feelings for his beloved were stronger than what had been between them in the past. As a result, he began to verbally insult the protagonist and degrade him. Since his feelings had been previously hurt, he spared no feelings in his rebukes. The boss, observing from the sidelines, was compelled to intervene once more, as otherwise his subordinate might have been physically harmed. Unexpectedly, during the altercation among the group of men, Haejoon accidentally struck the boss of the brunette in the face. The accident shocked everyone involved, including the perpetrator. First and foremost, Jitae rushed to attend to the injured, deeply concerned. It seemed the man was more surprised than hurt and quickly reassured everyone that he was fine. Once the brunette believed this, he began to scold his ex-partner for such a crude outburst, arguing that resorting to violence out of personal anger was unacceptable. Haejoon was aware of this and thus attempted to explain himself. Unfortunately, the enraged blue-eyed man did not allow him to speak a word, as he continued to berate him. Subsequently, the young man tried to blame himself for the situation, as he was the one previously targeted for harm. The instigator could not bear to watch this and tried to leave silently. This action only infuriated Jitae further because the instigator did not even apologize to the injured party for the harm caused. Although the boss had repeatedly assured that the blow had not seriously injured him, The protagonist consistently demonstrated his concern, which greatly impressed his colleague. Eventually, when the young man offered to treat the bruise and apologized again, the man explained that it was unnecessary. Soon after, the boss began a discussion about the identity of Haejoon, specifically debating the nature of the previous relationship the blue-eyed had with him. Given the situation that had just unfolded, the brunette was compelled to admit that he had been in a relationship with him. This revelation genuinely surprised the boss, although it seemed he had already suspected it. Therefore, after clarifying the details, he joked about remembering the times when Jitae used to turn off his phone at work, likely due to an overly emotional partner. The protagonist did not deny this, thereby acknowledging the man was correct. During further conversation, the boss reminded him of his earlier advice, which had urged him to be more discerning about the people with whom he associates. The young man, as usual, did not heed his boss's instructions. Instead, he suggested treating the injuries sustained earlier. Only when the unpleasant situation was somewhat resolved did the blue-eyed man start to ponder what exactly Haejoon wanted to tell him. He understood it concerned someone from his circle, but could not guess who precisely. In the evening, the brunette was once again drinking at a bar catering to the LGBTQ+ community. He went there with a purpose: to gather information about his partner, as he was the only new person in his circle. Unfortunately, no matter how much the young man inquired, no one could tell him anything about the dark-haired man, who rarely frequented the establishment and scarcely interacted with the locals. After speaking with the bartender, Jitae discovered that he was the only one who had spent the night with Haejoon, as the man had shown no interest in any other patrons before. While the information made the blue-eyed man even more anxious about the words his ex-partner had said, the bartender, merely glancing at the dark-haired man's photo, thought he seemed like a decent person. Reflecting on the situation, the young man suddenly realized he was being foolish, naively believing Haejoon's unfounded accusations. For this reason, he tried to temporarily forget about the strange situation. In the process of conversing with the bartender, the brunette received a compliment about his appearance. The bartender confessed that the blue-eyed man seemed to look better lately, and even suggested that it might be due to a new relationship. Unexpectedly, the dark-haired man called, expressing a desire to meet. As soon as he learned that Jitae was at the bar, he immediately said he would come to him soon. In the next moment, the man walked into the bar as if he had just been standing outside the door, not as if he was on his way to meet him, which greatly surprised the young man. When the two young men began to talk, Haejoon confessed that he disliked the fact that the young man had gone to the bar alone, where they had first met. The dark-haired man likened it to betrayal, but the blue-eyed explained that he was simply accustomed to drinking alone and hadn't thought to invite his partner. Although the man understood the reasons, he requested that next time they go together. Naturally, Jitae felt compelled to agree. After some time, the two young men decided to leave the establishment. Once in the car, without much thought, Haejoon decided to kiss the brunette. He confessed that he liked the scent of alcohol on him. Such behavior further embarrassed the blue-eyed. Unexpectedly, the man suggested they should not postpone their drinks together, but go straight to his home to spend time together.